Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Eye on Icon. This week's episode is the one where we go around the ecosystem interviewing people in Icon. And with me today is Cyrus, who works at the Icon Foundation. Cyrus, welcome to the show, man.
Hey Fez, how's it going?
Good. Cyrus, look, do you want to introduce yourself? Well, we know your name. Do you want to tell us what you do at the foundation?
Yeah, sure. So I lead the Icon Bridge project, which, as I think many listeners know, is the centralized interoperability solution. Once the specification for BTP 2.0 comes out, that'll be transitioning over to BTP integrations as well. So yeah, that's kind of what I oversee.
Cool. And okay, so that's foundation talk. Now, a bit about yourself, like where you come from, how you got into crypto, your experience, etc. I'm sure the community is eager to hear that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess like in 2017, right before that run up, I got into crypto. Just someone that I worked with had been telling me about it, and I kind of use it as like an opportunity to build on my code skills, because like I was trading a little bit and I was like, well, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know how to code and I kind of get better at coding. So I built a trade bot to pick up on signals of what's good to trade and everything. And one of those signals that came up was Icon, like during that short period of time that it ran up. And so that's how I learned about Icon. I didn't do much in crypto from like 2018 to 2021. During that time, I started working in the financial industry. I was a software engineer at JP Morgan's investment banking line of business. And I kind of just, I got to see like how finance runs there. And I don't remember when, I want to say like 2020, I started reading a little bit more about crypto again, and kind of just remembering back and being like, I feel like a lot of issues that I see in terms of efficiency of how trades are executed could be resolved with some of the things that are done in crypto. And also, I just had like a very deep fascination with like Satoshi's, whole legend of that, and what Bitcoin is, and how it came to be, and how it's framed as kind of this like anarchist thing. So that's kind of how I ended up getting into crypto. I got into the Icon Foundation. I actually just messaged, I think, Brian Lee over Twitter, and I was like, hey, I kind of just told him the same thing. I was a software developer at JP Morgan, interested in doing some development in crypto, and he told me, hey, you should contact Ricky, who's at the foundation. And we kind of just hit it off from there. Ended up talking with everyone at the foundation, folks at Icon Loop as well. And I came on board almost a year ago, actually, last September.
Yeah, wow, okay. No, so Brian had his hand in it, huh? Oh, nice. Is there anything that meant?
He did, yeah.
So, is the bot still operational?
No, I was. It's something I've always wanted to go back to, but no, I shut it down like once the bear market happened in was like early 2018. It was just always said to trade to the dollar, and I wasn't that good at coding back then, and there was like this thing where sometimes the like the decimal value or the lot size on some of the assets would throw an error. And then I'd have to like restart it, and I'm like, well, I always know it's going to be telling me to put into the dollar anyways.
Yeah.
And this is very frustrating to run with how poorly written it is. So I just closed it, and I've had it on my mind for a long time, but it's so much effort that like there's no way I can do it for probably at least a couple of years.
Yeah.
So
okay, I'll make some notes, come at you in a couple of years about the bot. Okay, so Cyrus, what did you end up taking over when you started at the foundation, or what did you fall into, should I say?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I first came onto the foundation, I was working directly with Dong Hyun from Icon Loop. He was kind of walking me through the BTP Codebase, and I was just working through that on a code level. And then after a few months, at the beginning of this year, I stepped into the role of leading BTP integrations. And then over time, as that developed into the Icon bridge as well, which is quite a similar code base, it involves that too.
Okay, cool. So let's paint this picture a little bit, because I know in different chats between you and me, you've explained this really well. So we've got BTP architecture and we've got BTP integrations, and we see every dev update come out at the moment, and there's the architecture section, and they're making all this progress. But do you want to give a bit more context as to what the architecture team are actually doing when they're building out these components? Like, from what I understand, it's more of a research and dev perspective, where they're proof of concepting that these things will work, etc. I would like your take on it, how you see, given that you're there, you're front and center, you're the technical component of those pieces, you understand it. How does it work in your mind?
Yeah, sure. How you described it is pretty accurate. So on the architecture side, that's all Icon Loop, and on the foundation, our points of contact there are Scott and Hong. The architecture is effectively developing the specification for BTP. So the direct comparison to make is like Ethereum has I think their yellow paper has their specification of what Ethereum is, and then I believe it's a different group. I don't actually know, but I believe a different group of developers came in and developed the Go Ethereum code based on that specification. It's quite similar to that. So the architecture team creates the specification. Currently, they're using I think a local icon to icon network as part how they do this testing and research and development. And then the BTP integration side, we take that specification and implement it into production for various chains. And that's how it's been so far. I think it's been in discussion on the architecture side. I'm not as across the architecture as I am the integration, so I'm not entirely sure about this, but I believe it's been discussed for like that architecture to not just be a local icon to icon development or design, but to actually deploy that to some other chain. And that chain hasn't yet been specified, but that's kind of the direction that it's headed in right now.
Okay, cool. So that's that. And then, as you mentioned, integrations, then take that and kind of integrate with the various chains live.
Yeah.
So, before we jump into that, do you want to talk about once you took over? So, you explained how you got across the tech, and then the next part of it was actually stepping in and taking over from an integrations perspective. Do you want to talk about the state of where it was at and some of the things you saw that straight away, as you said, you're quite passionate dev and the way your DevOps and things like that processes work, because that is your passion. So what did you observe, and then what are some of the changes that have happened in the last 8 months?
Sure. That's a good question.
It's a loaded question, I know. Sorry.
It's a little loaded, but that's okay. No, I think like there's a few different perspectives to have on how development happens, and especially for a decentralized ecosystem, like the role of a foundation is effectively like we have a treasury, we give out grants, and the intent of those grants are to sustain the ecosystem. And there's ways to go about that, right? Like if we just give out a grant and we say, okay, based on this milestone, we'll pay out this amount or whatever, but we're not actually like deeply involved with that development itself. We leave that up to the contractors, and that's from a decentralization perspective. That can be the right thing to do, depending on how like in detail that specification is. So for example, like if we were to implement BTP across multiple chains in production, we could then give out a contract to a development group and say, hey, you can develop this on some other chain. And that probably wouldn't need as much oversight because it's already been done, and there's a lot that they can take from. The challenge, though, with such a large and complex project is it's very hard to make that definition. And even when we have the architecture and the design and the specification, in the process of getting that to production, there can be a lot of challenges that occurred, especially when there's multiple networks involved. And so when I came on, it was a lot more like independent, isolated groups doing developments for the specification of BTP 1.1. And I kind of looked at that as an opportunity because, all these different groups that were doing the development, they all report to me. And a lot of what they were reporting were the same things, and a lot of the challenges that they were facing were also the same things. So I took some time and some effort as part of the transition to the Icon Bridge Codebase to sort of unify that team. So now there's sort of like a core, I don't know what we want to call it, like a BTP integrations or Icon Bridge development group that is doing the
is it
it's we have, so that's that's not quite fleshed out yet. I think that's probably something that we can get into like separately, but yeah, I think I mentioned in like one of the dev updates that it's like the BTP integrations special interest group, but it's not actually established as that at this point. But the important thing to take away from this is the developers that do the near integration and the BSC integration, and previously the Harmony integration, which we did, but transitioned out of after kind of the state of that network is not at this point in a good state for us to want to continue with that. But those groups that do that development are all considered part of this core group that I have a lot more communication with. All those different people involved all communicate a lot more with each other as well. And the goals of the project are not just around here's a milestone for us to implement this. It's a lot of like, okay, how do we actually do this development? How does the code base look? What are our standards for doing the development of the code? And a lot of the what that means is a lot of the specifications of what the development is as it occurs is fairly ad hoc in that we're not just saying, okay, we want this group to integrate this chain. It's like we see this whole thing holistically, this code base. What's the best way for us to improve this? How can we generalize things? how can we make this better overall, and then like kind of take it from there. So it's not necessarily from a per chain deliverable perspective anymore. It's much more from a like agile team project perspective. And so that's sort of how it's transitioned.
Look, I actually really love this because, and I know everyone in the community will as well, because that the context you gave around the role of the foundation, it really resonated with me, because when I think of some other foundations and stuff, yes, they are basically issuing grants to teams saying, go build this. And then they kind of stick their finger out and those teams run and then build and deliver. And that's pretty much what was happening with BTP integrations, right? At the start, yep, a bunch of teams, we've got these integrations, here are your grants, go deliver. However, as you called out, this is not just something that they can operate in silos. After all, it is kind of, connecting blockchains, and they kind of got to talk and work together. So, okay, so you've come in, you've identified a lot, and you're putting a lot of work around those practices and kind of... So when you say realign the code base and things like that, do you want to... I know before you were talking the screen sharing, do you want to share the screen and talk through some of those activities that you're doing in terms of... when you say code base, testing coverage, things like that, what does that mean? What changes are you making that is setting up for future success?
Yeah, sure. So I can just walk through these. Can you see this?
I sure can. Yep.
All right. So this is, a lot of these are things that are not necessarily specific to this project. This is kind of just sort of like when we say things are done, what does that actually mean, and how can we assure that this is of a quality that is receptive to an open source community? Because it's one thing if we have closed off code as a business. Our code base is there's no customers necessarily associated with that code base, or there's no users associated with that code base. With an open source project, part of the users base that should be considered is oncoming developers to the repository. And I think in the crypto industry as a whole, that's kind of one of the main draws, is that it's all open, and that it's fine. It's open source, financially supercharged by a token. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is to get the development up to a standard where, as a new user, I can come on, I can quickly understand what's going on, and I can contribute to this as well, if I so choose to. Now, we aren't quite there yet. It does take a lot of time, and this is a very complex project. And this kind of gets back into what I was saying of that if you just give grants to contractors, their role and responsibility is primarily to deliver milestones, and that means making sure that the user that's involved can use the project. And if there's no perspective of the development itself, it won't necessarily align with all these things I'm talking about of targeting people in the open source community, because what that effectively means is all that we care about is whether or not this domain functions properly, so that we can send transactions here and it works and it's fine, and all that's good. However, it's not quite enough in my view. There has to be the ability for people to come in, learn how to develop, become part of our community and our ecosystem in a more long-term way, and be contributors to that ecosystem. So what we're doing currently, and for the duration of probably the rest of this month, is simply we just added test coverage reporting. So right now we're at 30%, which is fairly low, and that's part of why if I come on to Nexus, then it says, I think if I do like a refresh, it says like we're in beta. It's important to understand like part of the reason that we're in beta is that the test coverage is quite low, so what we did is we added test coverage. So now I can come in here, I can see like what files and what folders are sufficiently covered, and this gives a rough metric to when we talk about features are implemented or parts of the code working. We have some indication of the accuracy of that. So in this case, for example, like with Solidity, we know that roughly 20% of the code may work. We don't really know much about the other 80%, and that's like not a good place to be as a project. It needs to be a lot higher, and so all of the effort that's going into this now is simply just getting these numbers up is part of it. So moving forward, the requirement is for any code to be added, the coverage has to be 80% or higher. And this is pretty standard in the financial world. And I think like in tech companies in general, that's kind of like, the number itself isn't the best determining factor because some lines of code matter a lot more than others. But it is like generally a good representation, and an easy way for me to ballpark this.
And so just so that, because people may panic a little bit when hearing, but for context, like when the devs have written, they still do their own testing, their unit testing components that tells them that the code works and the output of what they're trying to create is there. This is that kind of, when it's all been built, your test cases that come around testing every aspect and every angle. Have I kind of got that? Is that what, when you say test coverage, it's that overarching end-to-end test cases and granular at the same time? So stuff they run once their code is done, they run these scripts of test cases that make sure that their code is working the way it's meant to be?
No, those have, it's actually the opposite. The way that you described it is more of the typical flow. But in this case, what we've done, we actually have end-to-end testing currently, and we built out like a whole framework for that. This doesn't include end-to-end testing. This is simply saying like this just looks at test files, which are specifically like unit test files, and it goes through those and says, okay, what's been called here is like 30% of the lines of code that exist in that. So our unit tests cover for JavaScore roughly 32% of the code base, and it's really nice to be able to see this because that number should be a lot higher, and so that's what we're doing next. And I think the thing to understand about the project is like it's ongoing developments and it's early, and how it's been up to now is like we don't have these sort of standards enforced, and generally speaking, I don't think most projects have these like that high. Seen between 50 and 80%. It's kind of the ballpark. I want to just target 80 because it's pretty simple to do. And for all of the code that's currently there, we're just going and adding those tests to make sure that that's good to go. And then for all additions moving forward, they all need to be above 80% as part of the requirement for it to be accepted into the code base in the first place. And this way we can just easily see all of that.
And so I guess one of my other things I was getting at is like once we hit 80% and there's new code, Solidity, integrations and stuff, a lot of this can be reused, right? So a lot of that effort that the team's been putting in is setting up in the future, as new things come about, they won't be sitting there again back at 20%. It's reusable, is what I'm getting at. Is it?
Yeah, all of this is I mean, we're at a point now where, like, because we were able to launch Nexus to testnet and mainnet, and like if I do a transfer, it works. We haven't seen any issues since the launch to mainnet, and so like from a functionality perspective, everything is good to go. And we just want to make sure that like we're across everything. Mm-hmm. And when we add a new integration, like it's going to use what's already here. That's why right now we don't want to add anything new for a little while, just because like if we make what's there currently good, because we have the full flow, it'll make things really quite simple. Like a lot of this is just repeat. Like if going from BSC to Ethereum is virtually the same as far as like adding the chain goes to Nexus. That's the same for a lot of EVM chains, but we don't want to do that at this point in time, because it's really important that this all gets improved upon. And similarly, so that's for testing. Yeah. Similarly, we want to have the same thing for documentation as well. So currently, if I come to let me see.
So the Icon Bridge is now public, isn't it? It's no longer private.
Yeah, Icon Bridge is public. This specific repo is not. This is a private repo, but I just wanted to get across like some of the issues that are in here. Still, we put some of the issues here if they're if they're not necessarily associated with the code base, or if they're sensitive issues that can't be public at the time that they're reported. So like this is just an example of one of the things that we're doing. So we're going to be going through and adding documentation as well for how the entirety of the Icon Bridge works, how a developer can come in and build locally, how they can test, and sort of just make things as easy as possible for somebody to come in, understand how these things work. Now that's given that they have computer science background and a certain degree of knowledge of how to program.
Yeah, it's not teaching them to code. Exactly. They have that skill set. They just can look at the project and go, okay, now I understand, and this is what I need to build, and something. And I'm smiling a lot when you're talking, Cyrus. Didn't mean to interrupt, but this is something from the Icon side. Like when you go, it's been called out for a while, and I know Eric's been doing a ton of work in getting that documentation, but it's still light years away from where it's meant to be, where someone who comes across Icon and says, yeah, I want to build on Icon Java, that sounds good, but then they go to the docs and it's like, what the hell, how do you even get started? So this is something you're extremely passionate about, ensuring with Icon Bridge it's not like that, it's all set up perfectly.
Yeah, and it's something that, like, once the ball gets rolling on it, I really don't think that it'll be like as much. I don't want to say that's a one and done kind of a thing, but it's something where, like, when code gets added, how it is currently is it's just the code gets added and there's not much thought to like presentation. And it's not just a presentation thing, by the way. I mean, it is important as a developer to like properly document things and to properly test things, because if you go back to the code that you wrote even like a week ago, you may not necessarily remember what that was that you were doing, and you're going to want to run through how that works. And just like as the person who writes something, I want to do that. Now, for an open source project where anyone in the world can look at the code, we want to make sure that as many people as possible can come in and understand how this works, because that way we get to attract more people and we get to grow our community more. And that's where the real value comes from. And everything that I just described about the Icon Bridge, I mentioned that this kind of effort is not specific to that project. I am using that project as like the standard for things moving forward. But it takes time to get there. So it's kind of just like, because I oversee this, that's how it's going to be, and then we can move into other projects and have it be that way for those as well.
Yeah, especially when people see, oh, this is working, this is, and people love it. Like, then it's even more of a trigger to adopt. So
yeah, and it is contingent on the success of that happening as well. Like it's not like we can just say, oh yeah, this is going to be much better, and then everyone's going to adopt it. It's very hard to do, and in a decentralized ecosystem, it's also very hard to unify everybody to be aligned on the same page of what to do, and it's what I'm currently attempting.
Yeah. So again, I like to tell the story because there's so much coming out here. When you came on board, it's very normal for foundations to give out grants and teams to start building. You came across, that's what was happening, rightfully so. However, when you took over, you noticed a lot of duplication, a lot of various aspects. People were just doing their own thing. So yes, a product could have shipped earlier, but as you came on and observed and were getting close to shipping something, there was a lot of hacks happening in the industry, and a cautionary side was taken where you identified, okay, actually, we need to kind of streamline this more, and with the way the teams work, the way the code base is, test coverage, things like that. So you've gone, and that's what's taken time and effort, because it just doesn't happen. You can't, people have their own ways of working, and you're trying to join various different teams, different companies, let's say, to kind of come in and work together and have similar ways of working. So it is an effort. It takes time, but it looks like things are falling in place. Would you feel comfortable saying that compared to January, where you are today, you're feeling a lot more confident and proud, in fact, to talk about the project?
I mean, I think even back then, I was apprehensive about releasing BTP. We had BTP 1.1 developed and connected to Moonbeam. I will say, like, I do wish, if I were to go back and do it again, I definitely would have released that to testnet, and I definitely would have started this whole process sooner. It took me a little while to kind of piece these things together, and now that I understand, sort of, like, I have my own perspective and understanding, and it's a lot more of a clear picture for me now than it was back then of sort of how this all works. I do feel that it's kind of going in a very good direction. But I wouldn't, I don't want to make it seem like what we had before wasn't releasable. It was just like, it was just very evident that all bridges across the industry are like a very massive vulnerability, because, like, back in, I want to say, like 2018, 2019, there was a lot of rug pulls for DeFi. There's a lot of hacks for DeFi, and people kind of figured out, okay, these are the main attack vectors. We get auditors to look at those attack vectors, and there hasn't been anything new, as far as I'm aware of, since that's kind of been locked down a little bit better. There's nothing to say that a new attack vector won't pop up there, but that's a very different scope when it's a single network application to when it's a multi-network application. When you talk about bridges, everything's new. Everyone's learning about it as it's going on, and that's like in the world. Like, this is a research project. It's not like a solved thing yet. And when there's a lot of money at stake, that's a huge risk. And we've seen all these hacks happen where people take huge hits because they absorb that risk. And I just felt like it's not worth rushing into. Like, let's just look at what happens. Let's wait. Let's play it a little bit safer. Because even if we say for BTP, we have security, as our primary points. Security is verified on chain. There's nothing that guarantees that the verification or any part of it that is secure from a smart contract bug perspective. And because bridges are fairly new, those kinds of attack vectors are still being figured out. And I just wanted to wait on that. I was very nervous about seeing all these different projects release and kind of rush through this. And so that was the reason, that was the intent behind, and that also also from a communications perspective, I think we had said like, oh, BTP's around the corner, Icon Bridge is around the corner, all these different things. If I had just released these to testnet, and at this point it's a little hard to go back and through the commit history because we didn't even tag them to figure this out. But if I had just done that, I think it would have been better. But the main thing I was thinking of was just I want to make sure that we're going a little slowly. And also at that time, I think the market was still kind of in a fervor. So there's a lot of people trying to rush through things. Yeah. Now that it's slowed down a little bit, now that it's going down, that's unfortunate from a price perspective. But the nice thing about that is when it's a bull market, it's all growth. When it's a bear market, it's like, okay, we can actually slow down. We can do the development. We can, take the time to do things the right way. Yeah. And that's really kind of where I'm much more comfortable in that situation.
Yeah. Cool. So what I actually love about what you said is the DeFi reference is so true. You're right. There were a shit ton of hacks. People realized Aave came up with the concept of a flash loan, and as soon as that was put out there, all of a sudden we started seeing, and to this day we still see it, but in very unique ways. But the standard way of just taking a flash loan and draining an LP or doing something that drained protocols' funds became a big thing when this tech was introduced. And now we have data that this has happened, this has transpired. So audit firms look at that and go, okay, these are your vulnerabilities, and then people adapt and change code and to make sure they're not susceptible to something like this. But with bridges is kind of, to your point, the 2018 stage, where we're seeing a mass launch of bridges left, right, and center. So yeah, Icon Bridge is just launching, and we have 15 to 20 other bridges that have launched. I think that all the time, going, oh my God. But to your point, yes, they've launched, but they're new tech, and we haven't really seen the full, all the ways the bridges could be attempted and hacked. We're starting to see that. And to your point, Harmony, yes, like there's a chain that was getting critical acclaim. It had a breakout products, things like that. Adoption, bridge got hacked. Now they're in a complete rebuild state, and we're not speaking ill of them. I'm just to your point. It really resonated with me what you said. Like, now it's unfortunate that's happened, but that's another vector that can be dissected from a security standpoint and go, well, have we ensured that what happened to them? All these steps have been put in place to ensure it doesn't happen again, and it forms part of that audit process, which leads me to audits.
Yeah.
How are things going on that front? Because we know Binance Smart Chain's out. I'll ramble a little bit more. So from everything you've said, we are going to focus on the test coverage and that documentation aspect. You want to get that good 80%, because once you're there, as you called out, then we can start moving with those integrations. The integrations can start happening a lot quicker, especially if they're similar code base like Solidity, which we've deployed. So they can then adopt that testing standard. We know it's safe, secure, and slowly start implementing new chains into Icon Bridge. So there's one. What about the audits? How's that process been? What are you finding? Have we started audits? Talk to me a bit about that. The community wants to know.
Yeah, so the audits have started. We started the Golang Codebase, which is the relay for the Icon Bridge project, I think like a few weeks ago. and we're starting the smart contract side. So that's the Java and Solidity smart contracts for Binance Smart Chain. That kicks off on Monday, this coming Monday. And so, that's ongoing while we're also trying to improve test coverage. And I'm sure that from their perspective too, by the way, like they would raise the test coverage as an issue that needs to be improved upon before we can say that, this is good to go. Because that in itself is a very big vulnerability. And like all of this is to say, from our side, it's the development is ongoing, and I'm trying to play it safe. We are deployed to mainnet. We're not incentivizing people to use that. It says on Nexus it's a beta. I don't want anyone to think that I should be locking away millions of dollars here or whatever. It's just there for just the proof of concept if developers want to take what we have and work with it as it is currently. And just to kind of play around with and test with. The fees on it too, by the way, are just primarily the cost of BSC's network fee is fairly high, and we just have a flat fee of covering that. And yeah, so the as far as the audits go, we're using we're collaborating with a company called For Your Eyes Only, or FYEO, and they did Wormhole in collaboration with Kudelski, and they've done a lot of other projects. They did Cardano's DApp security write up, and so they're well familiar with bridges, and they've been pointing things out to us already to kind of go through and square away. Yeah, that's kind of the state of things right now.
Cool. Okay. And one more thing about the test coverage. So, because I reckon that will come up, it's come to my mind, and I'm sure community members will think of it as well. How long do you anticipate getting that test coverage up to 80%? How much time and effort do you think it'll take? So is this a few months worth of work, a couple of months, a month?
I would say probably 2 months is my guess. We're shooting for 1 month, but it's based on however long it takes, and there's not really it's not like a hard requirement of we're not going to do anything at all while we're trying to improve this. We will start integrating ICE fairly soon because Snow fairly soon, because they just won the auction slot, and we want to make sure that bridge is there, but it's something that's definitely a primary focus for us for at least a month, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, cool. No, look, that's really good. I think solid discussion here, Cyrus. Is there anything today? I'm going to get you got to just become a regular on the show, man. I think once a week, just get you on and give an update. No. But very much, I think it would be great to get you on every 2 months or something like that, so you can give a bit of an update on some of the milestones that have achieved and challenges the team will hit. But overall, I know you're very big on, as you talked about, it's not just open source. You're trying to also ensure what the teams currently they're working on. So how you showed those private repos and things like that, eventually you want it all to be open source, and you want it to get to a point where an individual can click on a report from a dev perspective in GitHub and see exactly what the next month's release plan is and what's in scope to get deployed to mainnet. You want to get it to that level of detail from a transparency perspective. Is that correct?
Yeah, scheduled release plans are a fairly common thing. Obviously, we can't predict 100% everything and accurately say, it'll take this amount of time. It's a very complex code base, and it's also a very new project. If it was something more simple, then we could confidently give estimates to things. But yeah, I mean, all of that's going to be open to people. I don't want to say when, because I really don't know. It's just like once it's in a place where I understand it well enough, then I'll be sharing it with other people. Yeah. For now, we are transitioning to that. Right now, it's a monthly release plan. Monthly is pretty often. Typically, it's like quarterly or even longer than that. But we are transitioning to that, so that way, we'll just be releasing every month. Yeah. I don't have to worry about what gets released, and that also resolves issues like if I'm thinking, oh, this should be in testnet, but I don't necessarily do that like I did with BTP 1.1. It makes things easier. But yeah, a lot of this, the point of all of that as well is like I want to make sure that the community understands what's happening a lot better than they currently do. And like the gap in time to making that happen is because of the amount of effort involved with this. And to your point of coming on the show more frequently, I mean, I definitely would be happy to do that and speak more often to the community on the work being done. There was one other thing I wanted to say. I cannot remember. Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember.
All good. Well, I will take a bit of blame there. There's many times I keep telling Cyrus, you got to come on the show. Eventually, Cyrus turns around and go, well, you got to send me an invite, damn it. I'm like, oh, shit, it's on me. So my bad. But no, look, overall, ton of information here. I think I don't often listen to the episodes after I record, because even after I'm done editing over and over again, I can't stand listening to my own voice. But this one I think I'm going to listen to. Just there's been a ton of detail in it. Cyrus, thank you for coming on the show, man. Is there any closing words for me, the community, anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, first, thanks for having me on, and we have very frequent conversations, and it's always a pleasure. And thanks to the community for all the support. It seemed like there was a fairly positive reception around the release, both to testnet and mainnet for the Icon bridge. I know that like communication about what is being done is not quite where we want it to be, and a lot of my effort is going to be around that. Moving forward, it just takes time. And the last thing I want to say is, throughout this whole conversation, I've been talking about what I am doing. Part of the reason I'm saying it as like me and I in these things is because I am primarily representing myself when I'm speaking to you in this. But I want to be clear that like the foundation has been very supportive of all of this, and all of the development groups involved have made this a very, very like easy process as far as this improvement and this transition goes. It's not been an issue of like, oh, people aren't willing to collaborate or whatever. It's been actually very, very positively received internally. It's just that it takes time, and a lot of it's like us all figuring it out together. And I also want to thank the foundation for that, and all of the development groups involved who have been so helpful in this.
Well, great to hear. Support. So you're being supported all around, and you feel supported. So fantastic, man. Look, as always, until our next chat, thank you for coming on the show. We'll have you on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No worries. Everyone, like, share, subscribe. Get this content out there. This is the stuff you want to hear about. Make sure people are listening to it. Take care. Bye.